1 in 5 U.S. adults become rich for parts of their lives, wielding extensive influence over America's economy and politics, according to new survey data released Monday by the Associated Press. These new rich, as defined by the study, have a household income of $250,000 or more at some point during their working lives, putting them, if only fleetingly, into the top 2% of earners. The report comes after President Obama's impassioned warning about the gap between the rich and poor in America and how that gap is the defining challenge of our time.
The opportunity gap in America is now as much about class as it is about race, and that gap is growing. So if we're going to take on growing inequality and try to improve upward mobility for all people, we've got to move beyond the false notion that this is an issue exclusively of minority concern. And we have to reject a politics that suggests any effort to address it in a meaningful way somehow pits the interests of a deserving middle class against those of an undeserving poor in search of handouts.
Obama said problems once far more prevalent in depressed urban areas predominantly populated by minorities are now no longer specific to cities or any race. Mark Morial is the president and CEO of the National Urban League, and he joins us. Hi, Mark. It's good to talk to you. Thanks for taking a few minutes with us.
Thanks for having me.
You know, in this address, as we just heard a little bit of, President Obama did address this this opening gap between the haves and the have-nots. Can you talk a little bit more specifically about how much that gap has widened in the last 20 or 30 years?
It's widened significantly over the last basically 3 decades, but it's also been exacerbated in the aftermath of the recession. And I think it's important to just think that as we've rebuilt the economy, as we've come out of the recession, the gap has indeed widened significantly, with people at the top getting most of the earnings and people in the middle and at the bottom, maybe in some cases being reemployed, but being reemployed in jobs that don't have the benefits. So people are having a tough time making it, even those who work, having a tough time paying their basic bills of food, clothing, shelter, and care for their families. It's a very important issue because the United States has always been predicated on the ability of people to be to move up the economic ladder, to be born perhaps as the child of tough and difficult times, but through education and opportunity, have a chance to achieve middle class status literally in one generation. That's also eroding. So the president is right to keep the spotlight on this issue. The Urban League has always kept the spotlight on this issue. And now with people like the president, Pope Francis, and others, I think joining this cause, perhaps we're going to finally get new awareness and new action.
You know, it's surprisingly and almost ironically, it would seem that some of the Republican policies, the Bush-era policies that perhaps created some of this gap, or at least supported the gap, President Obama and his administration have propagated. How much do you fault the current administration for at least the maintenance, if not the widening of the gap?
Well, I would like to see more action, particularly in the short run, an effort to raise the minimum wage. Congress should vote on an increase in the minimum wage. It's now at $7.25 per hour. If it had kept pace with inflation, it would be $10 and maybe 60 cents. The best proposals in Congress would raise it to about $10.10 per hour. And I say to those who say no to that, that they can't point to one scintilla of evidence would suggest that an increase in the minimum wage would hurt the American economy or hurt job creation. There's just no evidence to suggest it. And so that would be a step in the right direction. It wouldn't solve the problem, but raising the minimum wage would lift a lot of working poor out of poverty.
Yeah, what do you think are the increased dangers, the disproportionate dangers to the African American community in this gap between the haves and the have-nots?
Well, it leads to more alienation. It leads to more people being locked out and left out, and therefore, I think finding other ways to support themselves. That's, first of all, I think, what we've got to keep in mind. Secondly, I think for the African American community, it means that we've not come full circle. We've not full circle, but we've not been able to deal with the remaining issues that confront the civil rights movement, which is closing the economic gaps that exist. That's the remaining unfinished work. And if we don't do it, then we're not being true to, I think, the very important battles that were fought in the 20th century. Thirdly, I think that there's a cost for everyone in the high levels of poverty and high levels of income inequality. It simply means that we don't have the kind of overall economic growth, that we are not building the kind of nation necessary to be competitive in the 21st century. There are many reasons why closing the economic gap, helping people achieve upward mobility, benefits not only African Americans or Latinos or white Americans, for that matter, who find themselves stuck in this situation, but it also damages the overall economy.
In the time we have left with you, I can't let you go without, of course, talking about Nelson Mandela. I know you've had the opportunity to meet him, to know him. Your work has been pivotal in the anti-apartheid movement here in the U.S. Just share with us your interactions with Mr. Mandela and what his legacy has meant for you and your career.
Well, I met Nelson Mandela on two occasions. In 1990, when he made, if you will, his first tour, 8-city tour of the United States, after being released from prison. He met with a group of activists at a church here in New York. Many of us had been student activists, had been leaders of the anti-apartheid coalitions around the nation. And it was striking because he came to the United States to thank us for being a part of the effort to not only free him, but a part of the effort to achieve a free South Africa. Then secondly, when I had the privilege of serving as mayor of New Orleans, Nelson Mandela visited Louisiana. He visited Southern University in Baton Rouge as a part of the renaming of the School of Public Affairs as the Nelson Mandela School. That was special because at that point in time, he came back as a head of state, as the president of South Africa. And indeed, everyone knew, whether it was in 1990 or in 1996, that this was a special person. I was just one of many who had a chance in the 1980s as a student and later as a young lawyer to be part of this effort here in the United States, to be aligned with freedom for South Africa, with ending apartheid. And I was proud to be a part of that. And it was special to just to be in the presence of a great human being. And that's who Nelson Mandela was, a great human being.
Absolutely. That's the theme that we've heard over and over and over. Mark Morial, we want to always thank you. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, take care.
Thanks.
And we will be back with more.